Snowmaking is big business in the high country. Without miles of underground piping and millions of dollars in equipment, the ski season would start when Mother Nature decides, like it did in 1981, when most resorts did not open until after Christmas. Today, all 5 ski areas in Summit have guaranteed water rights to supplement their natural snow. They can pull a combined 3,000 acre-feet of water per season. That's 97.8 million gallons, or enough to drain Goose Pasture Tarn 4 times over, from a high of 48 million guaranteed gallons at Keystone to a low of 2.9 million at A Basin. It translates to 2,000 acres of snow when blown, and Blue River Water Commissioner Troy Wineland is in charge of making sure no one takes more than they're allowed. Crystal 93 invited Wineland to the studio to explain how snowmaking works behind the scenes, from stream flows and on-mountain reservoirs to the challenges everyone faces when there's more water promised on paper than there is on land. Phil Lindeman, Crystal 93 News Director, and I'm in the studio today with Troy Wineland. He's Water Commissioner for the Blue River Basin. Troy, thanks for coming in, making time to talk this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Phil, for having me.
Great. And Troy, for those who aren't familiar with what your job is, explain real quick what you do as a Water Commissioner here in Summit County.
To summarize it briefly, I'm the water sheriff here in the Blue River Basin. So I am responsible for administering and enforcing the water rights of the state for anyone and everyone who uses water here in the basin.
Great. And you are not a county employee, though. This is something through the state.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm an employee of the Division of Water Resources, which sits under the umbrella of the State Department of Natural Resources.
And I understand this is a year to the day, or been 7 years to the day, actually, that You've been in this position.
Yes, yeah, it is. Yeah. So,
what did you do before this? How'd you get into water commissioner? Always work in water, natural resource?
Yes. So prior to my current position, I was a hydrologist and fisheries biologist for the Forest Service, primarily here on the Dillon Ranger District, but also on the Routt National Forest and the Tongass up in Alaska.
Okay, so you're pretty familiar then with Summit County and the area and the very complex system that we have here as a headwaters region and district. We wanted to talk, though, about snowmaking and how snowmaking fits into this big picture. Snowmaking is an interesting component to our water system. Tell me how snowmaking works. How water rights work for, say somebody like Breckenridge or A Basin. What goes into deciding a water right, and what are those water rights right now at the ski areas?
Oh boy, where to start there? So each ski resort holds their own portfolios, if you will, of water rights, and they are administered within the Colorado prior appropriation system, first in time, first in right. And as it works here in Summit County, typically when the ski areas are making snow, which is in late fall into early winter, there's typically a call on the Colorado River Basin from the Shoshone Power Plant down in Glenwood Canyon. And because of that call, ski areas are limited as to how and when they can divert water. But there are a series of agreements, and primarily the Clinton-Fraser Agreement, which allows the ski areas to divert the water out of priority. And what they do is they replace that water in time and quantity, primarily from the Williams Fork Reservoir or Wolford Reservoir.
Okay. And when you're talking about, priorities and what goes into a water right, how are those decided? And how old are a lot of these water rights for ski areas? 80s, earlier?
Yeah, most of the water rights for the ski areas primarily came about in the 80s. I think it was 81 was a very, very bad year here in Colorado. Most ski resorts didn't open until, I think it was after Christmas. That really, I think, was the primary driver in investing in water rights and storage and snowmaking infrastructure. Of course, it varies throughout the state, but that was kind of the primary motivator for most of the ski areas. So in the scheme of things, 1980s water rights are very junior to, say, like Shoshone at 1902 or a lot of...
Oh, wow. Yes. I didn't realize that some of those other ones on the system are that old.
Very, very senior, yes.
Okay, great. And snowmaking, of course, as we all know, makes the dream happen. It makes the ski season happen reliably in early October, mid-October, like we're used to. Over time, though, do water rights really change? Or once they're kind of put in place, are they pretty difficult to finagle, difficult to change around?
They're pretty reliable. Once a water right is adjudicated and made absolute, they're pretty reliable. They are subject to change or can be changed, but that process of changing a water right can be cumbersome and costly for a water right holder. But once they're held, again, once they're adjudicated, they are pretty reliable. But I say reliable in the sense of water rights, but not reliable in the sense of actual water availability, as evidenced this year.
Absolutely. And that's a big reason to be talking about this issue right now, is that, of course, everybody's seeing the most visual indicators, the reservoirs, seeing, Lake Dillon's looking low and Green Mountain's looking low, and we see the Colorado River running through, Glenwood Canyon, looking like you could play hopscotch out on those rocks right now.
Yes.
How do water rights, fit into a low water year like this, where we're running low all across the system?
Well, primarily the way they fit in is those who have the senior water rights are the ones who can continue diverting in times of shortage. And those with junior water rights, if they have no form of augmentation or exchange to supplement their more junior water right, then they must be curtailed or cut off entirely, which is where I step in.
Okay, and explain real quick what augmentation and exchange means in terms of water rights, and especially here, Summit County water rights.
Okay, a discussion of snowmaking here in Summit County would not be complete without touching on the Clinton-Fraser Agreement, 1992. So basically, that's an agreement between Summit County, Denver Water, and the ski areas. And the way that works is, again, because the ski areas are out of priority against downstream seniors, in our case, Shoshone Power Plant, they would not be able to divert water out of priority because they are so junior. What the Clinton-Fraser Agreement does is, through Denver Water, for every acre foot of water that each of the ski areas diverts for snowmaking, Denver Water releases a like amount and in like time from either Williams Fork or Wolford Reservoir. That water is released down the Colorado to keep the Shoshone Power Plant call satisfied, and allows the ski areas to make their snow. And then what happens is 20% of what the ski areas divert is that's considered the consumptive use of snowmaking. So 80% of it is going to return in the spring through melt, and 20% of it is consumed either through evaporation or loss to the ground system or ablation. And so Clinton Reservoir is basically the storage account to pay back the 20% to Denver Water.
Okay, and that's one thing that I've heard, when talking to ski areas about, how snowmaking and snowmaking expansion fits into the water system and, what's happening with water levels. And that's what they say is that, the vast majority, 80%, returns back to the watershed. It all comes back down into those creeks at the end of the season. Correct. And that really is what happens. That truly is what happens to most of the snow that's used, or the snow that is made on ski areas. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's just, just think of it as a further addition or storage in that beautiful white reservoir that we have on our mountains, I guess I should say, in most years. So it just supplements or adds to that storage reservoir.
Great. When it comes to, water rights, say somebody like Breckenridge, what are they allowed to consume? What kind of acre feet?
Well, just so speaking kind of generically across the board, these are average numbers. Let's see, Breckenridge and Keystone use, we'll just say on the order of 500 to 600 acre feet in an average year for snowmaking. Copper a little less than that. And A Basin typically most years less than 100 acre feet of water. And each of them have, as far as direct diversion rates, that vary from, on the low end, about 1 CFS to the high end, about 10 or slightly over 10 CFS. and CFS being a cubic foot per second. So that's the instantaneous rate of diversion that they're limited to with respect to their water rights.
Okay, and there's another limit that's put on that as well. So if flows in these nearby streams, so Keystone at the Snake River or Breckenridge pulling out of the Blue or anything else, they are also limited in terms of CFS. How does that fit into the picture?
It's a very important part of the picture. So my sister agency within the Department of Natural Resources, Colorado Water Conservation Board, they hold what are called minimum in-stream flow rights. And so each of the ski areas must adhere to minimum in-stream flows below their diversion points. For A-Basin, it's 2 CFS. For Keystone, it's 6 CFS. For Breckenridge, 10. Copper, depending on whether you're on the West 10 Mile or 10 Mile proper, it's either 7 or 2. 2 on the West 10 Mile, 7 below the confluence of 10 Mile and West 10 Mile. And so those are numbers that I have to watch and hold the ski areas to throughout the winter.
The sheriffing part of things.
Absolutely, yes.
And right now, how are things looking in terms of those flows?
It's a great question. So, we're coming into the snowmaking season. I just spoke with snowmaking director of operations over at Keystone just yesterday because I was firing up the gauge there on the Snake River. They're looking to prime their system, just kind of test for leaks this week. But they're all getting going, getting ready to fire up. And it just so happens that before they even begin their snowmaking, most of the rivers and creeks are already flirting with the minimum in-stream flow. So that's prior to going into the snowmaking season. So it's going to be comparable to like the 2012 season as far as low flows, low availability of water. So the ski areas that have available storage are probably going to be tapping into that pretty soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And that also would mean then that the snowmaking itself will be limited. So they need to tap into the reservoirs because they can't be pulling out of those streams if they're dropping below that level. And so even if a system has the capacity to blow, however many acre feet, in a season like this, they might not be able to reach that capacity simply because of those conservation limits.
Yeah, absolutely. So most of the ski areas, Copper, Breckenridge, and Keystone benefit from having some form of storage that they can tap into, and they're very fortunate with respect to how their delivery systems function and how they're situated. So they do have that storage capacity that they can tap into to safeguard against these really low years. Unfortunately, A-Basin, since just given the geography where they're located, they do not have much storage, and the North Fork of the Snake, particularly this time of year, is already at just a trickle. So they're kind of in a tight spot. But on the flip side of that, they're higher elevation, so they get a lot of early season snow that sticks around, as compared to the lower elevation resorts.
Yeah, and I'm sure those crews are hoping and praying that Mother Nature gives them just a little bit of help this year.
Absolutely, as well. Am I, for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure, and anybody else who's concerned with the water system right now. Now, speaking of A-Basin, though, there are solutions. There's potential solutions, at least. There are plans, maybe sometime in the future, for a second reservoir at the top of the mountain. What goes into reservoirs? What kind of work needs to be done before a reservoir is approved or can even be made?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, a lot of folks point to storage or additional storage as potential solutions, and absolutely, storage does offer a great solution to limited supply, particularly in times of low availability. The flip side of that, though, is, of course, environmental regulations that are in place to just kind of monitor and safeguard the environment when those structures are put into place. And typically, any new storage reservoir, the time scale and the money that it takes to get something like that approved is going up, I would say, probably exponentially over the years. These days, expanding on existing storage is much more cost effective and I guess acceptable within the environmental community.
Okay, yeah. So even though a basin might want to put one up at the top of Lenawee, it could take a long time. Like anything on the ski areas these days, it requires permits and approvals and scoping and all that other good stuff that goes into any new addition.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Finally, looking ahead to the future of snowmaking in Summit County. So, like you were saying, Mother Nature, ski areas are hoping for a little boost, and we're all hoping for a good season, maybe an above-average season that could really help things out. But if that doesn't happen, what could happen to water rights? What could happen to snowmaking usage in the future if water just is no longer available the way it has been?
Right. Okay, so this is going to be just speculation on my part, obviously. I think if we want or if we expect to run things the way we do currently, and by that I mean getting the resorts open early November or by Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's usually the target date, and there are very legitimate reasons why the ski resorts want to do that. I mean, it's reservations. I mean, it's for staffing purposes, reliability, and
business. You got to run a reliable business
absolutely.
If you want people to come. Yeah.
I mean, it's such a huge part of our economy up here. I think 60% of employment is through the ski industry or somehow related to ski industry. So it's vitally important. But if we want to continue with how things are functioning now as far as the reliability, really I think increased storage or additional augmentation or exchange agreements is what's going to be needed to accommodate that. And given climate change and how things are changing, the snow accumulation season is shrinking. It's condensing. It's on the front end and the back end. So you're confronted with that and the need to, possibly or likely add additional snowmaking to your resort's operations. So I would say storage or increased augmentation and exchanges is probably what's going to be needed.
Okay, so things could potentially be changing. And as we were talking earlier with augmentation and exchange, sometimes we find ourselves in a Fort Knox sort of situation where there is more water on paper,
yes,
as you said, than there is in a reservoir in real, actual, physical life.
Yes, yeah. I mean, to put it in other terms, the basin is over appropriated. There are more water rights on paper than there is physical water available, and it's only going to get worse as far as the overappropriation of the basin. Particularly with growing population, increasing demand on our water supply, and with climate change and the anticipated effects of climate change, which primarily are increased evaporation, evapotranspiration, and loss of the available water supply.
Great. And finally, when it comes to what you do throughout the rest of the season, how do you keep on working through with the resorts throughout the season, once even snowmaking season ends?
So yeah, right now things are ramping up. So I just went out and fired up 2 of the compliance gauges, the one on the Snake River at Keystone Snowmaking Diversion, and the other one over on 10 Mile Creek for copper snowmaking. Just fired those up yesterday. Blue River gauge at 9 Mile Bridge right there across from Tiger Run. Mm-hmm. That one's already up and running. That one's run year round. So my primary interface with the snowmaking areas is basically monitoring their compliance with their minimum in-stream flows and monitoring the rates of their diversion, just making sure that they're diverting only as much water as they're legally entitled to. And that involves just communication with the snowmaking operators and collecting records from them throughout the winter. So it's primarily just the winter season where I'm interfacing with the snowmakers, but yeah, great bunch of staff and folks. I mean, they're all very concerned about the environment, and they do a heck of a job, and they're very responsive to my inquiries and requests when things are getting a little sketchy with respect to the minimum in-stream flows.
Great. So the relationship there, it's not exactly dicey. Everybody's working together. Everybody
absolutely
does what they need to be doing.
Everyone's doing what they need to do, and we all get along.
Great. Well, Troy, thanks again for making time to come in, talk a little bit about snowmaking and how it fits into our water system. Enlightening stuff, especially as we're getting ready for the start of ski season in hopefully just a few weeks.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Great.
Thank you.
Troy Wineland, Water Commissioner on Blue River Basin on Crystal 93.